Russian oil shipments to India have seen a significant decline following the latest American sanctions on two of the biggest oil firms, which are Russian, Rosneft and Lukoil. It came into effect in the third week of October. The sanctions were announced by the Trump administration on the 22nd of October. They have left Indian refiners to rethink their oil sourcing strategies ahead of the November 21 deadline. Now, these new restrictions officially take effect from the 21st of November, and these sanctions, at least the primary sanctions, target American citizens or American institutions or American companies and banks, but there are also secondary oil sanctions which will affect Indian importers, Indian refiners, etc. Russian oil currently makes up about a third of India's total crude imports, about 34% or so, but analysts believe that the imports will fall further both in November and in December as the refiners reassess their supply chains. Now, we have provisional tanker data from Kepler, which is an international website which keeps a track of oil import and export data, which shows that Russian crude oil exports to India averaged around 1.1 million barrels per day in the week till October 27th. So this was the final week of October. 22nd of October is when the Trump-imposed sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil are announced. It comes into effect the next day. Prior to 22nd of October, the first 20 days of October, India was importing as much as 1.9 million barrels per day of Russian oil. This was the previous 2 weeks of October. In the month of October, India's import of Russian oil averaged around 1.6 million barrels per day. That's slightly higher than the 1.61 million that we saw in the month of September. So the share for the month, the entire month of October is almost similar to that of the month of September, which is 34%. But in the last 10 days, that is officially after the Trump administration announced the sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, there was a substantial fall. In fact, almost a 500,000 barrels per day fall, between 1.9 million barrels per day and 1.19 million barrels per day. Russian oil is also significant for India, particularly in the global energy scenario, the geopolitical landscape. Number one, because it allows India to diversify its oil sources. It reduces its dependence, whether it's on Gulf oil, American oil, or even Latin American oil, and thereby it helps sort of profligate the risk associated with coming from just certain geographies. Two, the sanctions also make Russian oil cheaper. Now, what happened after the Russia-Ukraine war was that there was no explicit bar on selling or buying Russian oil, but there was a cap on the price. So $60 per barrel was the price cap that was put in, and that helped India significantly cut down its energy costs. India has huge growing energy demand, and therefore it requires stable supplies. Russia was able to offer that over the last 3 years since this war began. Also, India's oil trade with Russia has further strengthened its own strategic ties. Before the war began, India's import of Russian oil was about 2% or 3%. It's now gone up to 30%, and this has had a knock-on effect on other areas of the bilateral relationship as well. And five, Indian refiners are suited much more to process Russian crude oil. When it comes to American crude oil, American shale, etc., Indian refiners will have to reprogram their assembly lines, their refining processes, and it's also slightly more expensive than buying Russian oil. And therefore, all of these factors have contributed in a way to India importing Russian oil. But that seems to be now coming down slowly but surely in the aftermath of the imposition of the sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil.
In the week to October 27, crude oil exports to India from Russia averages 1.19 million barrels per day, significantly down from 1.95 million barrels per day in the previous 2 weeks. Russian oil dispatches to India have dropped sharply after the US announced sanctions on Moscow's oil giants Rosneft and Lukoil on October 22nd, according to provisional tanker data. Refiners seem wary of Washington's latest sanctions, which are set to take effect from November 21st, where on one end, oil refiners have agreed to abide by Western sanctions. On the other end, Indian government says that its priority is to safeguard the interest of the Indian consumer in a volatile energy scenario.